Welcome to Stuck, Time to Improv. I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff, and I want startups to be wildly successful. Today, we're going to be talking about getting out of your own way with Nancy Berger from the Fear Finding Project. Thanks for coming, Nancy.
Thanks for having me, Mary.
So how have you figured out how to help people get out of their own way?
I did it by figuring out how to get out of my own way. I came to my work probably much like many entrepreneurs do, solving a problem for myself and thinking, wouldn't it be great to help other people solve the same problem? So that's how I've come to this work, through a lot of through my personal journey.
Sounds good. So how can people figure out that they're in their own way in the first place?
That's a great question. That is the first step. I call it sleepwalking, when we are kind of doing the thing we do and we don't have a lot of self-awareness, even about what's under our skin or what's keeping us stuck. So that self-awareness piece is huge, and it's simple but not easy. And the mechanism really is, when something doesn't feel like it's working for you, whether it's your work environment, your career choice, your relationships, your whatever it is, if something doesn't feel right, it's kind of intuitive, but people don't do it, is just unpacking it. What isn't working? What am I not enjoying? What am I avoiding? What kind of feels misaligned with how I envision myself? These sound simple, but they're not easy things to do. It requires, having a conversation with yourself and figuring out where these thoughts and feelings are coming from. And believe it or not, it usually ends up with people going back to first family dynamics, to how they were socialized, to how they kind of were imprinted as young people. Not in a blame game, in an effort to sort of decode ourselves and understand our programming, because only then can we change it.
Do you have tips for what kind of technique to use to do some of that unpacking?
Well, I actually have an infographic that I give away for people to use as a tool, and I called it my Fear Journey template. And what it really is a roadmap. And it actually is a picture graphic of a road that goes over hills and into a setting sun. And there's road signs on this infographic. And in those road signs, which are blank, I ask people to write down formative, memorable experiences that they had. 9 times out of 10, they're not positive experiences. They could be, you were humiliated in high school during a public speaking assignment, or during an audition for the play, or on the playground, or, relatives told you you'd never be a fill in the blank. Anything like that, I ask them to write down. And then in the rays of the setting sun, I ask them to write down how those experiences may be manifesting in their current life. So this can be a really helpful exercise in getting people to remember and connect dots and say, there's a reason why I don't feel great in my skin about this particular thing. Maybe I can dig into that and understand it a little bit better. And then we can reframe thinking around it.
It almost sounds like something that startup businesses might consider doing very early on in their journey, to make sure that when they do hit roadblocks, they have a better idea of what's going on and a better way of getting past it faster, right?
Yes. And I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs. That's kind of my give back exercise. I love to encourage these young people that have these great ideas. And we end up talking about, their family dynamics. I'm not a therapist. I'm very clear about that. But just because they're young it may be a little closer in their memory. But Mary, there's this misconception that as we get older, these things evaporate. They absolutely do not. So I work with C-suite executives, and we end up talking about, what their family dynamic was for their nuclear family, their first family. And it can be really enlightening and helpful so that they can choose different ways to navigate situations and they can understand themselves better. Once we understand ourselves better, we can change our thoughts.
Sure. And business is so much about relationships. And if you have
Yes.
a really good idea of where you are coming from, you have a much better sense of where you can go.
Absolutely, 100%. It can be very freeing. And I think people avoid it because they think they're going to get in the weeds. They think they're going to get, but it's very liberating to understand yourself. It just takes that first step of, okay, I'm going to unpack some things here. I'm going to maybe even write down what are the things that are bothering me and what would I like, how would I like them to be different? It's available to everybody to do that, but it takes some resolve.
Sure. Just writing it down is a very, very good idea.
So
we'll put links to your infographic in the comments so people can download it and find out how to get in touch with you, right?
Yep.
Any other, do you have an example of a time when you got out of your own way and how you got to that place?
So many examples. But one that comes to mind is I'm a parent. I have 2 adult children. And I realized in conversations with my adult children that things would get very activated and very, I would get a little bit helicoptery in certain situations. And what I realized by doing the work of unpacking that dynamic was that it had nothing whatsoever to do with what my child was telling me or how my child was interacting with me. It was triggering an old fear I had from my own upbringing that caused me to become hyper vigilant and over advising, giving too much, tipping over my skis, giving too much direction. And that was, I just started to put the pieces together. Like every time we have this conversation, I get like this. It doesn't matter how they present it to me. So it's nothing to do with them. And I went to my trusted support system, therapist, whatever, and unpacked that, figured out what it was. And once I understood it, then I reframed it. And the next time I was in that same situation, because I had built new neural pathways, I had started to think differently about it, created new neural pathways, they got stronger. I did not find myself triggered in the next situation that was similar. It's science. It works.
Right. I remember I finally retired as mom. My last child graduated from high school. I threw myself a party and actually retired as mom. So from there, thenceforth, you can come to dinner, but you can't live here anymore. Advice will only be given on request. And if I want to give you money, I will, but don't ask for it. And just laying out the parameters made a whole difference in the relationships.
Well, that's a great boundary setting exercise. And whatever the boundaries are that work for people, it's a great exercise to do some sort of boundary setting like that. And, it takes some self-awareness to know when you have to do that. So I think that's a powerful exercise.
Right. And since I'm always giving advice to startups, the overriding thing is it's ultimately going to be your decision. And if you don't take my advice, I don't take it personally.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the same. I talk to, young entrepreneurs, some that are still in college and programs and some that are recently graduated. And I make suggestions if they ask for them. A lot of the times I end up empowering them to make their own decisions, which is coaching, and coaching is not advising. But yes, I'm with you. Whatever they choose to do, it's going to be a gift because they're going to learn something from it. If it's a setback, it's a gift. If it's a success, it's a gift. It's all gifts. And the sooner they think that way in that growth mindset, the better off they'll be.
And thank you for unwrapping those gifts. Thank you again, Nancy Berger from the Fear Finding Project, for joining us here. I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff. I want startups to be wildly successful. And one of the best things you can do is book a synergy call with me at businessriff.com. And join us again next time for Stuck Time to improv.